All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. AJ Bianco here with Dave Frangiosa. You are listening and or watching what we're going to call right now Reflect Ed Live, because why not? I'm going to take control of it. So there it is. So welcome to Reflect Ed Live, and appreciate you guys out there joining us tonight. We're going to have a conversation about leadership and going beyond the title of leadership. And I got Dave here with me, and this is something we're going to do twice a month. We're looking at Thursday nights, the second and fourth Thursday of every month. So it'll be a little extension of Reflect Ed podcast. Maybe Dave will throw it on his podcast. We'll see how the conversation goes. But our conversation tonight is going to revolve around the title of leader and what the title really means. And Dave, I'm going to kick it to you because you had your most recent episode, which came out this week, the week of January 10th, where you spoke about leadership and what it means to you to be a leader and what it looks like in a school. So Dave, why don't you first say hello to everybody and then tell us a little bit about your episode.
Sure. How's everybody doing? For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dave Frangiosa. I host From Earning to Learning. I write blogs, and I'm a high school science teacher here in New Jersey. So, yeah. So on Monday, you and I talk about leadership all the time,
All the
and
time.
there's some, I guess, conversations around leadership that kind of don't sit so well with me as a teacher when we hear that term leader or leadership, we never think teacher, we never think student. We really kind of focus on administration.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about leaders, that's where our mind goes, but a school is so much bigger than that. And in order for it to be successful, in my mind, there needs to be leaders at every level, and we're not experts in everything. And sometimes we need to defer to people that do know more than we do. And, if you're like looking to implement an initiative, if you don't have teachers on board, if teachers don't have students on board, if you don't have support of the support staff and guidance and CST, if everybody's not communicating and doing their part in the thing that they do well, these initiatives are doomed to fail. So I think we need to maybe change the way we view leadership, or come up with a different term that we're using when we're discussing, like, the people who are setting the vision for the building in the district, right? And in my mind, just because you sit in a chair or you have a title doesn't make you a leader. Just because you have like tens of thousands of followers or the loudest voice doesn't make you a leader, right? So and those were just some of the ideas that I shared. And I figured maybe we can kind of have a conversation about that tonight.
Yeah, and I think it's an important conversation to have, because I think even when we talk and we throw the idea of leader around, we kind of look at each other and say, well, what leader? Who's leading? What's the definition of leadership? I think all of those things are pretty important because, as you said at the beginning, and I think we're going to kick off with this, the first thing that you think of when you think of leader is the administrator.
Yeah.
Right. You don't think anybody else in the building is a leader. You kind of just say, well, leader, definitely referring to the school administrator. And that's not the case anymore.
Well, I mean, look, the administrators should absolutely be leaders. They should not get to those positions unless they have those skills. So yeah, they play an important role in the school, and I'm not trying to diminish that, but it's just like we said, like the title says, it's beyond a title.
Mm-hmm. Right. The title does not make me anything more than what it is. Assistant principal is my title, but what I do with it is on me. Just because I have a title does not mean I'm going to get respect. Does not mean the kids are going to listen to me. Does not mean the teachers are going to up their game. It just means that here's another guy, with a title. It's the action. It's the skills that you portray. So why don't we dig into the skills, because in your episode, I was really, really loving the part you talk about the skills of the leader. You want to dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess let me take a step back. I'm very fortunate that the people who are my bosses are like really awesome people, and they do allow me to be a leader in my role. So I was reflecting back on the experience that I had and what I view as a good administrator, a leader, and my direct supervisor, the supervisor of science. She's amazing, and she couldn't be more supportive. And things that I come to her with challenges, and she's always positive and willing to help. And then my principal, he's just an awesome guy. My assistant principal now is one of my colleagues forever, and it's just you know especially during COVID, when there was like the challenges with childcare and everything, like they went out of their way to make sure that everybody felt like they were supported in a way where they could, you know, maybe take a few things off of our plate so we can focus on our job. And, and that job is to empower students to be leaders, right? They
Mhm.
empower us to be leaders. We empower students to be leaders. And, I think back, Tim Whelan, he's my principal, awesome guy. We had the book launch when it came out, and, he was here. Some of my family was here, a few other friends, and I kept introducing him. I was like, "Oh, this is my principal, Tim." And like after about the second or third time, he goes, "Dave, can't you just introduce me as your friend?" And like, and I've always thought of him as a friend, but like, but that's just the kind of nature of the building that I'm in. Is just like, there's not that line between teacher and administrator. It's just like, we're all working collaboratively to kind of make this place the best place that it could be,
Mhm.
and whatever strengths you have to add to that, like, do it. And I relayed a story about a student who, you know, I guess you could have written the student off and just said, "Oh, they're lazy, they don't want to engage," but it was more than that. Like they saw something that they didn't like, and they responded to it in a way that made me aware of it. And like that is challenging for a student, like to stand up to a teacher and say, "Hey, look, what you're doing doesn't work for us." And like for me, I learned a ton of lessons from that student. And you know when you see something that needs to be done to impact a situation positively, and you go about it and do it regardless of what the impact is for you, like to me that's a leader.
I think you have some good points there. I think you had some extremely good leadership around you. I think you named a lot of outstanding attributes for the leader. You know, you said somebody who's positive, somebody who's collaborative, somebody who empowers. Um, I I know I had, and this is going to come out really wrong. I don't mean this in any way. I know I had good leaders around me. I just don't know what stands out, if that makes sense. You know, I know when I first started my career, I had leaders around me, but I didn't have strong leaders that were good leaders that modeled anything for me. I just knew that there was leadership around me that would push me to do more, right? My social studies supervisor was a very good teacher and she was outstanding, right? As I moved throughout different areas, I met a bunch of people in other schools who are definitely good leaders and they embody everything that you just said. And I want to take that for myself, but it still doesn't mean that I'm doing the right thing as the leader, right? Again, because it goes beyond that title and it's just, you have a skill of what it looks like, but it's not the same. So what makes the leader? Like We know. So I can talk to you right now as a teacher, Dave. You are a teacher leader. I saw myself as a teacher leader. Why? The collaborative approach, that push to do more, that desire to allow teachers and students to feel like they are better than what they can be. Right? Is that part of what the leadership is?
Yeah, and I guess so, but you know, if we're talking about are you a leader? And like if you ask that question, do you think of yourself as a leader? I can't answer that because I don't think that's a question for me to answer. Right. Like if somebody came up to you and said, oh, you know what? Trust me, I'm a trustworthy person. What would you do? Like you look at me and be like, all right, the last thing I'm gonna do is trust you. Right. Like, so if you have to say this is what I am,
Mm-hmm.
then you're not it. Like like and I'm the leader, you need to listen to me. That doesn't cut it. Like, so I think there's and look, this is just my perspective as a classroom teacher. When the people who are in charge of the building and they say, you know what, I don't know everything, you know, and this is somebody who knows more about this than I do, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let them take the lead. And, for me, there's certain things that, yeah, I feel real comfortable taking the ball and running with. You want to talk about assessment, you want to talk about grading, I'll jump out, I'll be the first one to volunteer, right?
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's other things. If you want to talk about budgets, if you want to talk about like, it's just like, you know what, not my area. Like that's not something where I can add value. Right. And like, I think those are the best leaders is the ones who know where their strengths lie and, where they can kind of amplify somebody else's strengths
Mm-hmm.
and where they say, you know what, I know I'm not the best at this, but I know AJ is. So, he's taking the lead.
Yeah, it's Buri Kafale, Principal Kafale says, stay in your lane, know your lane, know what you're good at. So look, for me, there's things that I know I can handle. There's things I know I'm way off with. You throw a math curriculum in front of me, I can give suggestions to my teachers as to what they can use to help in a student-centered learning approach, but I'm not going to sit there and say I'm an expert. I'm going to rely on somebody else with better eyes that knows the curriculum better to actually, judge what I'm seeing. I'm not going to tell my wife what she's doing is wrong because that's her thing and that's not my thing. So I have to trust and have to empower other people. And I think that's a major part of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and look, I understand there's pressures, um, you know, that administration deals with that teachers don't. All right. Nessie was a math nerd.
Now he's just a nerd.
So let's say hi to Fonz out there, Mel, Chris. Thank you for joining us. Um, but yeah, so there's pressures that you deal with, right? Because you're the public facing part of the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
You take the parent calls, you deal with the board of ed, you deal with the superintendent, like you deal directly with those aspects of education that we don't deal with,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I get that. So there's other pressures, there's things that you have to deal with that we don't. And you know, there's not always that transparency and honesty of like, this is why we're doing what we're doing. Right. And I was in situations, not at this school, at a previous district that I worked at, where, things were happening and it's just like, okay, we'll give it a shot. And like, they put this physics first program in front of us and it was absolutely terrible. And so I said to my supervisor, I was like, oh, you know what? I didn't like it. Here are the reasons I didn't like it. And it was sold to us like, well, they're getting freshmen to do things that we can't get our juniors to do. And I was like, oh, that's awesome, right? If you can teach me how to do my job better, great. I'll take it any day. And then like 2 weeks after that, it was just like, oh, here's this other great program. And I was like, oh, wait a second. So this isn't about something that can help us do our job better. We're going physics first, and you're trying to kind of manipulate us into buying in. And like that just didn't sit well with me. And that
Mhm.
was actually when I left. So, like just not having that transparency and those lines of communication. Cause like if you want to consider yourself a leader, like you have to communicate. It's a two-way street,
Mhm.
right? So it's not just telling people what to do, it's hearing those difficult things and making the adjustments that can be made. And I liken your position as an administrator and how you have to interact with teachers to my position as a teacher and how I have to interact with students, right? So I survey my students all the time, and they tell me some things that like sometimes aren't easy to hear, right? It's never easy to hear that like what you're doing doesn't work for me and here's why it doesn't work for me.
Mhm.
But, it's necessary to hear that because without getting that feedback, that constructive criticism, we can't grow, we can't improve, we can't have a better product, right? And my class wouldn't be what it is today without students directly impacting how I approach them. And I think schools could be a whole lot better overall if, everybody took the ego out of, leadership and like this is my position and this is my role. And I know what you were saying before about know your lane.
Mhm.
It's not like, hey, stay in your lane. I know
Right.
that that's not what you mean, but like sometimes people take that attitude as just like, stay in your lane. And when we have that attitude, well, you know what? Like Fawn said before, there's some people who, you know, look, if if I'm a principal and Fonz is in the room and I got something to do with like ed tech, he's doing it, Nessie, like he's doing it. Like it's not gonna be me, because I know like even though my lane is to like be in charge and make the decisions, they know way more about this stuff than I ever could. So, like, delegate that, right? Take that input. Just a computer guy, far
Just
from it, Fonz.
I was just gonna say same thing. Same thing. Um, so this is like a this topic is really really important because I think as you and I talk about like that idea of leadership and what it should look like versus what it is look like, and one of the things that we keep saying is like leadership is not a top down model anymore, right? We keep talking about the idea of top down. So when we think about like what leadership should look like, we talk about a collaborative approach between everybody involved. you know Chris just said effective leaders empower others. um I think I think there are plenty of things to look at here that could allow people to be leaders, and it is a mindset and it is a skill set. And you mentioned before, like if you say you're a leader, you know maybe you're not, but it's like back in the day when you were in school, right? It's like you kept telling yourself you're cool, right? Oh, I'm the cool guy, I'm the cool guy. You're not really the cool guy. If you keep saying I'm a tough guy, you're not really a tough guy. So you can talk yourself into a situation, but the only way you actually can do it is to prove and to show and to see how you handle a situation. But I really want to focus on like a top down approach to leadership, because you know when we look at leadership from the beginning, that's what it was, right? It's person in charge and everybody else kind of follows that lead. It's not that anymore, correct?
Well, I think there still needs to be an element of that, right? There needs to be a roadmap. There needs to be a plan, right? And here's the vision for the district. This is what we want. Here's where we're going. But then as you're executing that plan, you need to get everybody on board, right? And not just the because I said so,
Mm,
right? Is like to truly say, "Hey, I think this is good for me. I think this is good for my students." Because look, we've all been a part of these initiatives where, it's the because I said so, top down, right? We're going to do this, we're going to have this training. All right. Now go to your classes and do what I say.
Mm.
And what happens? Teachers close their door. They write up their lesson plans to reflect, like, okay, I'm giving you what you want. And then they don't do it, or they don't do it in a way that's like in line with what the vision was, because, either that vision wasn't supported. Exactly. Chris hit the nail on the head here, right? A big difference between leadership and authority, but like people conflate the two, right? So they think I'm sitting in the big chair, you do what I say, that's leadership. It's not, right? Leadership is, providing people with the rationale for the vision, right? Why are we doing what we're doing? The support, right? What resources do you need? What training do you need? And that support's not just at the rollout, that support is ongoing, right? And then it's reflective. It's just, okay, are the things that we're doing working? Are we getting the outcomes that we desired, right? Are students benefiting? And not just with test scores, because I don't care about test scores,
Mm.
right? Test scores are a lagging indicator, right? Those come last, right? You'll see engagement, you'll see like culture, you'll see all that stuff change before you ever see an uptick in test scores. So,
Mhm.
like a lot of times we look at it and say, well, the test scores didn't go up. We got to abandon this and do something else. It's like, no, give it time, and like just understanding that, those things like, is this working? And the only way to know that is like to talk to students, to talk to parents, to talk to teachers, and like, really just be involved, get that feedback, even if sometimes it's tough to hear. And if they say, you know what, no, this isn't working, but here's how you can make it better, right? And then trying to do that, finding the resources, finding the professional development, finding the right people to come in and say, okay, here's how we did it, here's how you could do it better, right? Just get rid of that ego.
That still doesn't always work though.
No, well, it doesn't, because like, I mean, let's be honest, people have egos,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And there's a lot of teachers that, I've been teaching a long time, like, don't tell me how to do my job. I know how to do my job. There's administrators that feel the same way, is that like, I earn this chair and you'll respect it. Um, like, so there's a lot there. But if you look at the schools that do implement these initiatives well, right, there is that element of collaboration, right? They're like, everybody feels heard and valued and, respected. And like, that's a huge part of it.
That's the biggest part of it. I
Yeah.
think that respect, that piece of being heard, being valued. Um, I think it's so important that everybody, is on the same page. Like, just, all of a sudden creating a committee one time to answer questions and look for feedback does not build that culture of the school. It may help for that moment, but then in a year, if you do the same thing and nobody else's voice is there, I think that's where the problem comes in. I think some leaders are too afraid to actually like continue a process because they feel they're giving away too much power, or they feel they know how the staff is going to react, or they know, this is how it's going to end, so why ask anybody else? I know my staff too well, so if I ask them, I'm just going to get the same answer, right? So a lot of people take it out of their hands, and that's where the problems start. Oh, we're a family, but we don't talk. We just know each other so well that, it doesn't groove anymore. And I think that's where things fall apart. That's where leadership falls apart, because we have this vision of what it looks like, how it was going, how strong it was, but at any moment that could still crumble.
So yeah, I mean, look, I agree with you, right? But we're doing a disservice. Like, if you really want to get an initiative going, find your most difficult teachers, get them involved, right? Say, hey, look, I know this isn't going to work. Tell me everything that's wrong with it.
Hmm.
Like I, so I want to go in this direction. I'm not quite sure like how to actually implement this. Like, so, poke holes in it. Like, I know you have a critical eye. I respect your opinion. Right. And they will. And like, even so, when I moved away from grades, right, I invited parents in,
Hmm.
and before I ever did it, right, and like that was probably the best decision I ever made, because they got a chance to feel heard, right, and they got to ask me any question they want. They got to say whatever they wanted, and even if they didn't agree with me at the end, they understood that what I was doing was what I thought was in the best interest of the class, their students. And, there was a trust that if things weren't going right, that, we'd adjust and we'd make sure that we honored the intent of what we started, you know?
Hmm. I want to shift our focus here
Oh,
because Chris's question is one that I know he's not taking shots. I know he has a good question here. Um, so his question says, "How does ed leadership get so distorted when all admin were once classroom teachers?" And it's tough because it's not everybody who's distorted, and it's not everybody. It's not, but there are definitely things that happen behind the scenes. And I know that's always the excuse nobody wants to hear, but like there's things going on that like we cannot continue what we've always wanted to do, right? He also says what is happening in ed leadership programs. I think of my ed leadership program, and like they never took me through a day to day of what leadership looks like. They never told me about the phone calls that I would get. They never told me about the pandemic. They never told me, things that are going to come up at different times. So when I think about like leadership, I got into leadership not for the power. I looked at my classroom and said, I love helping 100 kids, 120 kids. I went a little bit further and said, I love helping my kids plus these teachers. Right. And I looked at it, I said, I want to help everybody. So now I'm in a school of 600 where I'm helping. The leadership that I want to provide is where I'm empowering my teachers, where I'm empowering my students to do more. But every day is not like that. My plan today, going into the building on Thursday, was I was going to set my Pomodoro timer, and I was going to make sure that I was in my office for some time, and I was going to be in classrooms for some time because there's things I wanted to do. And then I was going to bounce around. That shifted drastically between discipline, COVID, contact tracing, other issues that had come up. Like it's not that I didn't know this stuff was happening. It's just that when I was told this in class, it wasn't how am I going to deal with that on a daily basis. It's here's what you're going to deal with. You have to figure it out on the go. So I think for a lot of leaders, they're very much torn as to what they want their leadership to be, right? They have their building leadership. They have to answer to district leadership. They have to answer to parents. They have to answer to students. They have to answer to teachers. There are so many things you have to put into a box that it doesn't work. It really doesn't. You know, there are ways that we have to fix education that we can't fix it with one leader in a building. For example, I'm not saying this is happening in my school, but I think everybody can relate to this. When you're a teacher, you have your style. Am I going to go into your classroom and just change your style? I can't change an entire school when there are 60 to 80 different styles of teaching taking place. So when we're looked at as why are you doing this to us? It's because we're trying to get people on the same page, right? We want teachers on the same page so we can collaborate more. So these things could actually work well for our students. So when they move from the grade levels to different classes, things can flow nicely. But if teachers don't want to buy into that and don't see the value in it, then all of a sudden the school is dysfunctional. Then it looks like the leader's not doing what they're supposed to do. If
well,
that makes any sense.
it does, but that goes back to a previous point, is that you're not experts in everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, not to say that you weren't an expert in pedagogy when you were in the classroom, but like creating a framework, right? A flexible framework that everybody can engage with so that there's this shared vision and everybody's moving in the same direction. Because a lot of times, you have however many teachers in the building, you got that many different visions of what education looks like,
Hmm.
right? And so students are navigating class to class, like, okay, this is what AJ wants, this is what Dave wants, this is what Chris wants, this is what Mel wants, this is what Fonz wants. And like, so they could have to change their mindset 7 times a day,
Hmm.
right? And that's tough for a kid,
Absolutely.
right? And so they wind up playing the game of school.
Yep.
So, like, we need to get to a point through some of these tough conversations of, all right, here's a framework that we can all work within. Here are some non negotiables. Here are some things that, like, all right, maybe I don't like completely, but I could deal with, right? And so it's not necessarily, you don't have to be everything to everyone,
Right.
right? And I think a lot of times some people try to be, right? And if you try and please everybody, you wind up pleasing no one, right? And so, um, yeah, there, no doubt, those pressures that you deal with, that, um, you know, we deal with our students, and
Hmm.
like, our world ends like right at our nose. Like, we deal with our students, that's it. Like, that's your problems. Don't bring them to me. And I know there's a lot of that attitude, but I don't know. Things do need to change. Things need to move in a different direction. And so I want to get to a question that Chris had asked earlier. Is there some validity to the notion that some education leaders, admin, couldn't cut it in the classroom, um, but couldn't do anything else but climb the ladder? And so I know there are some people, like personally, that I've taught with, that I know that their goal from the time they got into education is they wanted to climb the ladder. That's why they got into education. Well, I want to be a principal or a superintendent, right? And that was their sole reason for getting in here. It wasn't about like being the best classroom teacher. It was like, I'm going to spend the time that I have to spend there in order to get to the next step. And
Right.
it was just solely climbing the ladder.
Yep.
I think the other issue that you see, because of the pay structure in education, if you want to make more money, you have to go to administration, right? And I mean, I'm fortunate where I work. I work in a high paying district. I have an advanced degree and I'm top of the guide. So, like, I don't feel that pressure where I need to go to administration so I can support my family, or pay the mortgage, or, but some people feel that pressure that, they start teaching, they don't have a family, they don't have the house, they don't have the mortgage. And then they get to a point where, we know what our salary is going to be for the next 30 years. And you look at that and say, well, I can't do the things that I want to do. The only option I have is to go into administration. So maybe they're making that from a financial standpoint, as opposed to um, you know, like, what's best for them individually or what's best for the school. So, I do think there's some validity to what you're saying there.
Mhm.
AJ, I don't know what your thoughts are.
I mean, obviously, right? There's definitely people in there who couldn't stand teaching after a while, needed to get a master's degree, figured why not move out of the classroom? I don't really love it to begin with. That wasn't my situation. So I can't really speak to that. I'm a 14-year teacher and I still see myself as a teacher sometimes, just not in that role. So for me, like, I went to teaching to teach and to be with students and to help them and blah, 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 go through that, different times. But like, there are definitely people out there who are just like, I'm going to be a principal. I'm going to be a supervisor. I want to be a superintendent one day, and those people, good for them, right? Good for them. They don't see the value of the classroom instruction. They see the value of leading for change. Hopefully it would be change. In New Jersey, you have to be a classroom teacher for 5 years before you can make any kind of move. What do you do in 5 years? My 5th year as a teacher, I was still a terrible teacher, right? So what do? You just know, I want to lead, and this is how I'm going to lead. So, I mean, you can't knock people, because in the corporate world, what's your job? Your job is not to be a peon. Your job is to move up the ladder in the corporate world to where you feel like you're the top of where you need to be. So why can't education be the same thing? I mean, if those people can be leaders and lead the right way, you don't need 10, 12, 14, 15 years in a classroom. If you're competent enough to do what you have to do and you're smart enough to work what you got, you're good to go. I can't knock people.
Yeah, no, look, I don't knock them either.
No,
And
no, no. I'm not saying you are.
yeah,
I'm not saying you are.
yeah, and there's definitely a need, right? Like administration fills a vital role,
Right.
and it's just how they view that role and how they delegate, and that determines like what the I guess the culture, the climate, and ultimately the success of the school is going to be.
Right.
You know, so you know,
This
Chris
comment
put.
here. Yeah, another comment.
So I don't know if that's true.
I
You
agree
know,
with that.
and I know there's teachers and there's people who have been trying to change education, but as a system, I don't know if this statement's really true. There's a lot of people who make a lot of money from the system being the way it is,
Mm-hmm.
mainly standardized test companies
Yep.
and people selling curriculum, and
Yep.
so I mean, until we take that aspect out of it, and we're not held captive by legislatures that are using these metrics that really don't measure learning and have no impact on
Mm-hmm.
student growth. Because I mean, let's be honest, how many teachers have actually seen the data on their students while they have them, where
Right.
they can actually make a realistic change that would affect that student?
Right.
They don't.
I,
Like, by the time you see the data, they're gone,
right. I think we
if you
have
see it at all.
correct, and I think that's why we have too many different programs in place where we have to, structure it so we can get kids to take more tests so we can see more data. Oh, this will be done right away. So here's an SEL data. Here's more testing data. Here's this. So we oversaturate the testing just so we can find out the data. And that's not the change in education. That's being told to us by people higher up who have no idea about education or telling us how to make a change in education. So are they trying to change education? No. They're trying to change kids. They're trying to make them better outside of school than they are in school. They're not using school well. If they really wanted to change education, we would not be doing the things we're doing to start school.
Yeah.
Bell systems, things have been going on since times in factories. The reason there's bells is so the kids could leave work to go to school. We don't have that now, but we still use bells to change classes, to end the day, to start the day. We still have desks that don't make sense. We still have rows. We still have chalkboards. Like, where's the change? We have people who have the mentality to want to make change, but we don't have the people in place to actually make, yes, the factory model, Chris. We don't have the people in place to make the change that's necessary. And we probably never will. Schools can change, but education as a whole is not going to change. And that's the message that like, as a leader, you must change your school to fit what you want it to look like that fits the students. You can't say, I'm going to change my school. It's going to be the marker for everybody else. But we look at the Twitterverse, and I'm looking at all these different things that take place. Like, how do you people do that? How do some of the people do that? Because that school is an anomaly. That school can't be my school. And not all schools can do that.
So here's another question, and this one's for you, right? How are admin hamstrung in their roles? And I don't know if you can answer this, and this is a loaded question, but
It sure is. It sure is. I mean, first let's talk about like how we hamstrung. Like, still budget. I can't just pull things out of the sky and be like, hey, we're gonna make a change. Like, I got teachers who are begging me to change their classrooms. Can't just go buy a new classroom setup. We still have to be approved. We still have to go through the process. It's still like, is the money there? Do I have? So like, even with that, even with money, when people think, oh, come on, you're a wealthy district, you have the money, but it's in different places. I can't just say, I'm going to change your classroom, because now your classroom looks beautiful and the rest of the classroom still look like it's 1960. Right. So what are we doing? Air conditioning. Like, where are the priorities? That's where we're hamstrung. We can't just spend money because we want it to make it look nice. We can't get rid of textbooks. We want to say no textbooks, but we can't get rid of textbooks because we have to allow different places to grab the textbooks if it's under 10 years old. We can't just throw them away. Like, you can be teaching with a textbook right now with, I'll just say, like a Barack Obama as your president. You still have to hold on to those textbooks. They have to be in your school. What are you going to do with them? What are you going to do with them? So there's definitely things with that regard. We still have our own mandates that we have to follow. There's still things that we have to do each day. There's still, paperwork we have to fill out. So there's definitely ways that I'm hamstrung. And there's more than that too, but I'm just not going to
Sure.
go on a
And
rant.
so, all right. And like, I'm interested in this question as well, right? So, are the obstacles that you're seeing less restrictive as an admin than they were as a teacher? Or are they just different? Like, so look, so, teaching, there's so many different models out there where like some schools are saying you have to put in 1 grade a week, or you like they set up your grade book and you have to do this many points. And I was in a school where everybody that taught the same course had to agree on the lesson plan.
Mm,
It was a common lesson plan. We had to do the same thing on the same day. And obviously I didn't stay,
that's the
but
leadership. That's the leadership right there.
well,
Right?
but
That's their vision.
that was not the direct result of that wasn't our supervisor. That
Right.
wasn't our
Right.
principal. That was the board of ed,
Right.
and like that board of ed at the time was absolutely terrible. Like they voted no to everything. They like
Mhm.
it was so bad that when I tendered my resignation, they voted no. Like, they just voted no to everything.
Yeah.
Like, so it was like, um, you know, but yeah, like, so there's certain things I understand that, like, if the BOE says, like, it has to be this way, you have to
Mhm.
follow it, we have to
Right.
follow it, like
Right.
that. But, like, I guess the nature of Chris's question is, do you find that there's more or less of that in your role now than when you were in the classroom?
I don't really know the answer to that, right? Because if when I was in the classroom, I wanted something and it was really something that was going to help, somebody found a way for me to get what I wanted, right? I think now I don't really ask for much, but you know, um, the there's so many policies in place that have been in place for a number of years. It's hard to make those changes, right? So if I'm looking for something, if I want to change, let's say a code of conduct, okay? Let's say I want to change code of conduct in the school. I have to go through hoops to get the code of conduct changed. I can't just say, here's the new punishment. If it's code of conduct, I have to now bring it to the superintendent, bring it to the board of ed, get it approved, bring it back to me. That could be like a 2-month process,
Yeah.
right? So I guess it's just different. I'll just say that. I guess it's just different because when I was, like I said, if there's
Well,
something I
and
want, I
it's not
got it.
comparing apples to apples
It's
because
not at all.
you're
Right.
not in the same district, you're not like, so your experience is different. Like you were in a classroom in different districts,
Hmm.
then, you had a different role, as the coordinator of technology, and then now, so I guess that like you can't make that distinction.
Right.
If you
It's
were
it's
in the
hard to
same
say.
if you were in the same district, it might be a little easier to discuss.
Right.
But
Right.
all right, so how you feeling about this?
This one,
Yeah.
I'm not talking about this one. I'm not getting involved with this one.
So,
No, every board of ed is different. Every board of ed has an agenda. It's public. There's people's thought processes, and not everybody sees eye to eye. And board of eds don't see eye to eye all the time, but you have to hope that there's a common goal to help our students.
and I've dealt with I'm on our negotiations team, so I've dealt with our board of ed, and we have a lot of people who volunteer a lot of their time,
Hmm.
and some really good people, so and look, um, it doesn't. doesn't mean that there aren't personalities or like challenges, right? That, I mean, that's everywhere. But there are a lot of good people out there that are just trying to do good for their school.
Correct.
Some of them are well intentioned. There are others that aren't. But I mean, it's there's just so many different boards of ed that, like, every local situation is vastly different.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
the one that I left in my previous district, I mean, it was like they were televised, they were 3 hours long, and it was like watching an episode of Jerry Springer. I mean, it was insane. So they actually had to hold the meetings in the school gymnasium because there were that many people that had public comment.
Wow.
And so I've seen my share of you know disingenuous board members, but I've also seen my share of board members that like are really trying to do something positive for the community.
Exactly.
And it varies town to town and actually election to election.
Hmm. Look, I think right now, um, it's so easy for people to get elected because you put it up on social media, you find your following, and you're golden. Doesn't matter. Like, you can be totally against certain things. If you got that following right now, it changes what the board of ed looks like. It changes that vision. So it's hard to judge a board of ed, based on what they're trying to do. Like, everybody is different. Every town is different. The goals are different. Obviously, they all have rules they have to follow,
Hmm.
but it's all different. It's all based on their area that you're living in. So
All right, so
that's a hard one.
yeah, I think we should start wrapping this up. So you know, leadership more than a title,
Hmm.
right? And if you could say like one thing, where do we need to go in terms of leadership and how we approach this going forward?
Where do we need to go as leadership going forward? That's hard. I for me and you, we're very much into the collaboration, right? We're very much into use the people around you to make them stronger. You know, the theme of our teaching staff this year is everybody pulls the tarp, which came from a podcast we listened to, right? So that's the collaborative method completely. We want everybody on board. We want everybody working together. We want everybody relying on somebody else, and that includes people from the top down to the very bottom. So for me, it's collaboration and empowerment. Um, there's definitely more to it than that, but that's the starting point because with that you can do so many different things. What about you? Where are you on this?
So for me, I play my part. I do what I can. If I see something that I think we can do better, I voice that opinion, right? So like I have no problem having those conversations with my supervisor, assistant principal, principal. But I also try to instill that in my students, right?
Mm,
Like speak up, right? So don't sit here and like, even if it's me, if you see me doing something that, you don't like, let me know, right? Like, and just getting that culture of feedback and everybody's in this together, and like I'm not always going to be right just because I'm the teacher, right? Doesn't doesn't mean I'm right, and like those situations where I can empower a student and like I can learn from a student. Like I had a 3D modeling project that I was doing for myself, and there's a program called Blender, and one of my students is like a whiz in Blender,
mm,
and so it's just like, could you show me a few things? And I did it in the middle of class in front of all of his friends, and they're just like, look at that, the student teaching the teacher. I
hmm.
was just like, we learn from everybody,
Right.
and so just being able to model that like, no, I'm not above you, right? Like there's just, I've been doing this longer, so like I have a little more experience, and that's really the only difference, and so it's not a hierarchy. It's just, you know, um, I got to make sure you're safe. I got to make sure you're protected. I got to make
Mhm.
sure that we're moving in the right direction. But like once all those things are met, we're equal,
Mhm.
And so like that's I'm trying to instill that vision in my students.
I think that they need to see it somewhere because they're going to be in the workforce one day. They're going to be doing these things that they should be doing. They have to understand like what it looks like. So kudos to you. Well done.
Oh, thank you. So this is going to be a regular thing. So anybody listening, watching, if there's topics that you want to discuss, want us to discuss, reach out to us. So you can find me at at David Franjosa on Twitter. AJ.
I'm all over the place at AJ Bianco, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, even on the Facebook. Feel free to drop a line. Let us know that you're listening. Let us know where you want us to go with this. You want to come on and have a conversation with us about something. That's fine. For now on, we're going to call this ReflectEd Live, and it'll go out there onto the ReflectEd podcast. You can check that out where all podcasts are sold or listened to or whatever. And Dave, where else can they find you besides on Twitter?
So I contribute to School Rubric, Teach Better Team. So you can find my blogs on both of those. And you can go to my website, which is reimagineschools.com, and there you can find like my personal blogs and podcasts.
Yep. Make sure you guys check that out. And Dave's doing some big things. So you can also grab his book that he doesn't want to talk about for some reason. I don't know. No, you don't want to plug the book right now?
I mean, yeah, I have a
All
book.
right. He's got a book. Check it out on reimagineschools.com. All right. Everybody, thank you very much. Dave, thanks for joining. Always a good conversation. We will check
right.
you in 2 weeks.
Have a good night.